and good afternoon. You are very welcome to this, the latest webinar in our series all about coaching. This time we're turning our attention to how coaching can help with our well-being. I'm Dr. Richard MacKinnon. I'm a chartered psychologist and coach. I'll be introducing myself properly in a moment, but just to let you know that you can ask questions at any time as we go through the session using the webinar chat. I'll try to keep an eye on that. Please feel free to say hi and let me know where you're dialing in from as we get started. You've probably noticed as well, this session is being recorded, and I'm going to be making the recording as well as some additional resources available to everyone who's registered for this session a little bit afterwards. So again, please feel free to ask questions at any point as we go through. I've got the chat up here on my screen. So, a little bit about me, just a moment to explain that I'm a chartered psychologist with about coming up to 25 years of experience as a practitioner. I spend most of my time, the majority of my time, coaching individuals and working with teams across three broad areas. They are well-being, productivity, and interpersonal effectiveness. And I've been doing that here at WorkLifePsych for coming up to 11 years. A reminder before we get into today's content that we've got two more sessions in this year's schedule for coaching related webinars, all of which are free, all of which can be found on our Eventbrite page. Next time around, I'm going to be talking about how we can use coaching to help with a lot of the productivity related challenges that we can face at work. And then, aptly enough, at the end of the year, I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, what happens when coaching ends? How can we ensure we get a good end to the coaching relationship and that the coachee can continue a focus on their development, even though they're not working with a coach anymore? So, on to today. I'm going to briefly summarize what coaching is from my perspective as a coaching psychologist, then expand a little bit on this topic of well-being. This is one of those words that, with lots of use in the outside world, has lost a little bit of its meaning. It can mean almost anything to anyone at the moment. But I want to bring it to life by exploring some of the really common challenges I see in my coaching practice with individuals, some of the traps we can get ourselves stuck in when it comes to well-being at work and life more broadly. And then I'm going to illustrate how we can use coaching to help with these. And then I'll close by illustrating some of the things that we do for our clients and how you can get in touch if you're interested in learning more. Very simply, I describe coaching as the intentional helping of someone moving from feeling stuck to unstuck. This stuck could be stuck in terms of making a decision, stuck in terms of some behaviors that don't work for them anymore, some patterns of behavior, stuck in terms of how they're thinking about their future and their career direction. And what we're doing using coaching psychology is helping them understand, why am I thinking this way? Why am I feeling this about this topic? How can I better understand my behavior and make some changes to that are going to serve me well? How can I get in touch with what really matters to me and do more of that stuff? We can bring coaching to life in a whole range of different topics. Today's is well-being, but as you're probably aware as a human, when your well-being isn't where you would like it to be, it does affect other aspects of your life, from relationships through to your social life, and can have an impact most definitely on your career. We don't do coaching to other people, not if we are a professional coach anyway. As a coaching psychologist, I bring my domain knowledge of the science of psychology to life using coaching skills. And much of my time over the last 10 years has been spent debunking myths and misunderstandings about both psychology, but specifically coaching. It's not telling someone what to do. It's not just setting them a goal and letting them work towards it. When we're bringing coaching psychology to life, we're helping someone learn more about themselves and learn more about how they can bring in valued change into their life to either achieve something or to work on something or to make something good better. It's not always problem focused. That said, in the world of coaching for well-being or health coaching, there is often something that at least the coachee is viewing as problematic. So let me unpack well-being. Um, for context, do a lot of well-being coaching with individuals, and I also design and run a lot of well-being programs where people will join en masse and go through between 8 and 12 months of activity, workshops, as well as coaching. One of the first points I make is that our well-being is not just the absence of illness or injury. Think about your own lived experience. Just because you haven't got the flu or you haven't sprained your ankle doesn't mean you'll rate your well-being tip top. It doesn't mean you might see yourself as in perfect health. And this is really important in the workplace. Just because someone isn't absent from work, it doesn't mean their well-being is where they would like it. And it doesn't mean aspects of their well-being aren't impacting negatively on their performance or other aspects of the workplace. The other really important point I would make about well-being is that it goes hand in hand with performance. So sometimes, in order to unlock someone's potential or improve their performance, it's about addressing these challenges to well being first and not afterwards. We don't neglect performance by focusing on well being. We unleash performance and potential by addressing well being. It is in no way a luxury, it's a necessary element of high performance in the workplace. There are different ways we can slice the well-being pie, if you like. One of the ways that I do it is on screen right now by drawing attention to the fact that there's three big slices of it. The psychological aspect of well-being, our thinking patterns, our emotional life, our mental health, our physical well-being, how this physical envelope we spend our lives in, how that is doing from very physical illness and injury through to things that are invisible to us, through to chronic illnesses and disabilities, and how that might impact our psychological well-being and our performance, as well as our social well-being, how we're connecting with others, the quality of our relationships, the depth of that connection, and the avoidance of disconnection and loneliness, which is a really big part of our well-being because we are social creatures. Threats to well-being, unfortunately, are many and varied, but to keep it simple, when it's coaching an individual at work, I'll make the distinction between threats that are inherent to the role. That could be workload. That could be the damage that they experience because of business travel. That's, frequent, demanding business travel. We can have threats from the organization, the culture, always being connected, not being able to disconnect from work. It could be friction or conflict with colleagues. It could be organizational aspects like change. But there are aspects of threats to well-being that come from within the individual. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is around this area. This is not to blame anyone. This is not to say this is your fault, but it is to say that at least a big part of our well-being is impacted by us and how we relate to the world and how we relate to setbacks and how we focus on, how we maintain our focus on our well-being. So again, it's not blaming, it's not a fault laying exercise, but it is saying that even in the best designed jobs, even the healthiest of organizations, will still find employees whose behavior, whose way of dealing with the world, and dealing with their workload will have a negative impact on their well-being. But the good news is we can support them and we can help them through that so that that doesn't necessarily automatically, inevitably lead to ill health. So I want to talk through some of the really common ways that well-being will raise itself in the conversation in coaching. Now, it might be the route into coaching is because someone put their hand up and says, I'm finding it hard to deal with my workload. I'm feeling stressed. Or maybe frequent absences mean their manager suggests this might be useful for them, or maybe a return to work after a significant illness. Lots of different routes. But it may be something like how people are relating to their colleagues, how the quality of their work has taken a dip, and other changes might have brought it to their awareness or the awareness of their manager, and coaching is suggested. The word well-being, the word health, they're not mentioned, but they come up because we're talking about root causes. We're talking about the reasons that their behavior, their performance, how they show up, why that's all changed. We don't have time in a relatively short webinar to go through all of the different ways well-being can make itself known or problems with well-being can make themselves known. I want to share some of the ones that when I was preparing this were front of mind for me from recent coaching work over the last couple of years. One of the first of these, and this comes up often at senior levels in organizations, is that individuals will have developed ways of coping with difficulty that don't serve them in the long term. This is a difficult topic because what are formerly called maladaptive coping strategies, these are unsustainable ways of dealing with challenge and setback and disappointments and so on. I'll frame this for an audience in a workshop by asking them, well, what do you do to cheer yourself up after a really bad day at work? And at least here in the UK, many people will put their hand up to say, oh, I go out for a drink or I open a bottle of wine when I get home. And there's an element of this that is humorous and people, buying into a stereotype. But there's an element of this that is unhelpful if the coping strategy that's being used is the only one or one of a few, and they're really leaning into it. The reason this is a well-being challenge is that these coping strategies give almost instant relief, but they don't deal with the presenting problem. They don't equip the individual with insight or resources to better deal with it. In fact, they detract from that. Many of them, including alcohol, will, for example, erode the quality of sleep. That does not set anyone up for a better day at work. And of course, many of these will, over the medium to longer term, either make the problem worse or cause a whole different category of problem for the individual. This could be because of alcohol, it could be nicotine, it could be the way they're using food to cope with it. And it could be maladaptive because it's just pure avoidance of the problem. We've got a trap that many people will use as the reason they want to talk to a coach to begin with, actually. It's an interesting observation. When it comes to well-being, it's often not a knowledge gap. So much health promotion has been done around the world that so many people understand what good health looks like and the simple things they could do to improve their well-being all around. For many people, they know, but they don't do. And that's the gap that we fill as coaching psychologists. What is it that's stopping you from doing something that you both understand and know how to do and know the positive results you'll get? Often it's just, I don't feel I have the motivation. I'm not ready yet. Or another version of this, a slight different version, is I don't feel confident yet to make these changes. I'll explain in a few moments how we can unpick that and turn it on its head. So this isn't about health promotion and explaining to people that going for a walk each day is good for them. The vast majority of people will know that. What's stopping them? Their thoughts and feelings about the activity. And when people think of imposterism or imposter syndrome, is how it's sometimes referred, they think about performance. They think about the impact that self-doubt can have on how good someone is at their job. For me, my mind goes straight to well-being. And the reason for that is, well, imposterism is the belief that somehow you're going to be found out. At some point, people will realize you're not as good as they think you are or that you need to be for this role, and everything will come tumbling down around you, and you'll visualize yourself being fired on the spot and escorted out of the building. So it's sort of catastrophic thinking about the future and some really deep-seated self-doubt. Now, how does this relate to well-being? Because oftentimes when people are experiencing this, for a period of time. They will cope with that by putting more effort in, working harder, and in fact, their performance might outstrip those around them. But for them, they're not paying attention to what others tell them. They're not paying attention to feedback or appraisals. They're paying attention to the fact that they still believe this could all go wrong. I describe it to people as a little bit like imagine you were in a race and you couldn't see the other competitors and you didn't know where the finish line was, but you had to win. That's what it feels like to experience this over the longer term. It's this unsustainable striving for brilliance when we don't know what that is, and we're not really paying attention to the data from our five senses, what other people are telling us, and what we can understand. We're just listening to that voice that says you're not good enough. I would class present bias as a bit of a root cause for people not attending to their well-being in a proactive way. So a topic that I work on a lot with aspiring leaders and existing leaders, but also with people at the very start of their career is self-care. How are you going to look after yourself and ensure that you maintain your well-being as much as is within your control? And one of the things that stops people doing healthy things is being stuck in today. I feel fine. Why would I need to do anything about my well-being? And the flip side of that is I survived today. It worked. I survived this week. I got through this busy month. It's this stuck in the present and not thinking about, if I had to repeat this month 6 times, 12 times, how would my way of working have an impact on my well-being? What might I look like if there was no break and if I kept using this unrelenting, long hours, high effort, no self-care approach? Self-care is meant to be proactive and habitual. We engage in self-care activities not because we get an instant result or because we need to. We're making an investment in our future selves. When we neglect self-care, we'll then find ourselves doing more coping and find ourselves having to bring ourselves back from the brink of illness or recover from illness. So this what I'm feeling today is what I'm going to feel in the future, or how it is today is how it's going to be in the future. That's how present bias can get in the way of us engaging with health, promoting behaviors, healthy activities, and so on. So if I am neglecting my self-care, what am I doing? I'm setting myself up for illness. I'm setting myself up for absence from the workplace. I'm eventually setting myself up for burnout. And one of the resources I'm going to share with you after today is an interview I conducted with a psychiatrist and psychotherapist who specializes in burnout. And one of the things he calls attention to in the book he wrote recently is the downside of the belief that we should just keep calm and carry on. Just keep going. At some point, it will get better. But in organizations, unless the system changes or we change, that's not going to work for us. It's really not. So one of the things that we need to do while acknowledging we would like the system around us to change and we could maybe do something proactive is to focus on self-care. And this is not just relaxing, taking a break, treating ourselves. In fact, reliance on treats isn't sustainable. Self-care is anything that we do intentionally to improve our well-being when it's sensitive to the context. In other words, given the week that's in it, this is a thing I can do that will benefit future me. If we neglect that, then our focus is going to be on recovery. Our focus is going to be on getting well after a stress-related illness or indeed burnout, a very, very extreme endpoint that we don't want to reach. Relatively, but not totally, modern experience for employees is the inability to disconnect from work. There was a time, and indeed I remember it, when you left work, there was no way that you could work. You left the office and you left work behind. We can't do that now. We're connected. We can work from home. We can receive messages on our mobile phones, on our laptops, and everything in between. And the perception that we need to remain connected or the explicit demand that we are connected can have a real impact on our ability to um, get that disconnection, get that space from work, have that time to dedicate ourselves to non-work roles, to actively recover, to rest and to sleep. All of this will have an impact on that. So, a really big topic that comes up, maybe not as the number one item that people want to work on, but something that comes up through conversation is that they're finding that work is bleeding into their personal time, and that over time they're maybe putting some tasks and some responsibilities almost automatically to the weekend. I can't get it done Monday to Friday, but that's fine. I've got the weekend to do it. And then they find themselves connected to work, thinking about work, doing work 7 days a week. And I mentioned it earlier, this important point around disconnection from people. We want to be able to disconnect from work, don't get me wrong, but disconnection from people and the feeling of loneliness is is quite a taboo subject. People feel uncomfortable talking about it. But at the same time, it's a necessary thing for us to talk about. So I'll share a link with you after this session to our resources about this topic because it's a very big topic and it includes a free white paper that you can download that is all about beating loneliness in the workplace and some evidence-based tips for that. But just to reiterate, loneliness isn't just a social issue. When we experience loneliness over time, it has a real and measurable negative impact on our immune system. So loneliness can make us sick. Now, whatever the reason for the disconnection is, it's something that's worth addressing proactively and doing something about it, not letting it be, so that we can avoid that outcome of loneliness and its impact on our relationships and its impact on our well-being. Let's say that's the bad news out of the way. These are all the no, these are just some of the ways that well-being can make itself known in coaching conversations. The job of the coach is to identify what might be a way forward. What can this person do to make changes? Where do they want to get to with this? There are no one-size-fits-all solutions in coaching. Indeed, well, there shouldn't be. We shouldn't be talking about simple magic bullets here. But there are a few different ways that we can unlock someone's perspectives, free up their thinking, ensure they don't hold themselves back, and they can work towards something really important and valued and meaningful to them. Coaching full stop, and what a coaching psychologist should be doing is combining these four things. First of all, providing support. Support can take many forms, but a conversation I had just earlier today illustrated it that when we're able to support someone by giving them a name for the thing they're experiencing, now they've got language to describe it. We're supporting them by listening, and we're not being, a social listener and waiting for them to stop so we can say something, and we're not judging them. We're also using accountability. So they make a commitment to do something, we'll hold them accountable for it, which is a core element of coaching. It might be the commitment to read something or to take a simple action or develop a habit, but we'll hold them accountable and explore why they did or did not do it and how it went for them. This is what separates coaching from simply reading a book about a challenge you're working with or looking something up online. We're missing that human accountability, which is incredibly powerful when it comes to behavior change. And we've got the objective role of the coach. And it's not just I'm not going to judge you, but I'm going to look at this from multiple perspectives, and I'm not your boss. I've got no power over you. I'm not going to punish you, but I'm not your friend. So I'm not going to just agree with you, and I'm not your spouse or a close family member. It's a completely different relationship, and that's one of the reasons it's so important and so impactful. And as a coaching psychologist, we're bringing our expertise, we're bringing our scientific understanding of how people think and feel and behave, how we can unlock behavior change, how we can ensure they learn how to do this for themselves, and how they can avoid feeling dependent on a coach, which is, again, something we'll talk about in our December webinar. But in addition to this, there are various techniques and various models, and I want to highlight some of them now to illustrate just the range of different approaches and how these can make a really positive impact on somebody's well-being. The first of these, and anyone who's watching this who knows me won't be surprised by this, I'm mentioning psychological flexibility, something that maybe I'm known for. But psychological flexibility is an evidence-based skill set, or this skill set leads to increased psychological flexibility, which in part the research has demonstrated boosts our well-being. So how does it do this? Because they're skills, anyone can learn them, and that is what's incredibly motivating about this approach. But we can also be creative, we can also be pragmatic, we can also be sensitive to someone's situation, culture, any other differences. We can be really, really flexible with it. So what we're doing is teaching people how to reconnect with what matters to them. Why does that matter for well-being? Well, it gives them a sense of this is what I think is important in life, and this is the kind of person I want to be, rather than being pulled left and right by their thoughts or their emotions. They're using their values, as I've got on screen there, a bit like a compass to give them a sense of direction, something really quite solid that they can use to help them guide behavior, make decisions, navigate difficulties. And that's really important with well-being related change, because you might know the change you want to make and you might practice that, but then invariably you'll encounter a setback. How do you keep going? Or how do you navigate it when someone offers you something unhealthy to eat, or offers you a cigarette, and so on and so on? Values are a really powerful tool when we're talking about our well-being. We're also developing the capacity to be in the moment we're in, to be mindfully aware. That way we notice what's going on around us, and we are able to better shape our behavior to suit that context. We're learning how to see ourselves with a bit more flexibility. So rather than viewing ourselves over simply, or buying into stories about what we can and can't do, we're able to see ourselves as a complex person made up of lots of different things. But I'm not my job. I am not my illness. I am not my stress levels. I am not my weight, and any other things that they might be buying into. We can then teach people how to step back from unwelcome thoughts and emotions, and so that the thoughts and emotions aren't telling them what to do, but instead their behavior is guided by their values and a connection with the present moment. Now, one of the things that can make behavior change really quite difficult, any kind of change, and especially with well-being, is our sense of psychological discomfort. These are all the thoughts and feelings we don't want to experience. So when it comes to making well-being related changes, they might be anticipated discomfort about what other people will think of me. What will my colleagues think when I go for a walk at lunchtime instead of joining them down the pub? What will my friends think when I go to the exercise class instead of meeting them? Or even, oh, I look outside and the weather's not so great, and I said I was going to go for a walk, and maybe it won't be so much fun. Discomfort can make itself known in so many different ways and appear like a stop sign. What we're doing with building psychological flexibility is we're learning to see it as information. And we choose what we do with that information. And maybe it's not a stop sign, but maybe it's a blinking light on the dashboard that we can say, yeah, I am feeling that, and I'm going to continue. And people learn how to do more of the things that matter to them. They commit to behavior that works for them, even though it might be uncomfortable, even though there's no guarantees of a positive outcome, but they know why they're doing it. It's aligned with their values. I mentioned self-care a couple of times already. One of the really powerful things that we can do in coaching for well-being is help individuals to realize that they have a lot more discretion in their routines than they realize. What's really great about looking at your own routines is that you can see your habits, you can see when you're likely to do things, and the gaps in those routines where something small but intentional could really pay off over the medium to longer term. And it could be, and it ought to be, having a range of these that we can draw upon that are a good fit for the context we're in. Like I said, given the week I've had, what would be a really good example of self care here? And ensuring that we're not using self care as an excuse for avoidance or over reliance on treats and so on. Seeing self care as something broader than just relaxation, seeing it as an investment in my future self. Coping is similar but different. Coping is what we do in response to the challenges and learning to cultivate a toolkit of coping responses that are flexible, that some of which will address the challenge you're facing, some of which will boost your emotional um, um, how you're feeling about the situation, and ensuring that they are all sustainable, that they are not going to be those ones that will, like tobacco, alcohol, food, and so on, will potentially make the situation worse. This is very important because how we cope is something we can decide on. We don't decide the challenges that come our way. We might wish we didn't have to deal with them, but they will come our way. And that's why this is really helpful. Making sure people feel equipped to cope enables them to reduce the amount of avoidance or wishful thinking and just trying to think their way out of a situation rather than taking helpful action. And in my experience as a practitioner, when people learn to build their psychological flexibility and they learn to practice coping, they're able to make the distinction between something being fun or even pleasant and something that they can do. You know, it wasn't fun. It was in no way pleasant, and I did it, and it didn't spark joy, but it gave me a sense of satisfaction, and I'm glad I did it. Because if all we're chasing is happiness or moments of joy, then we're going to avoid this stuff that isn't fun. And some of that stuff is really, really important for our well-being. A big mistake people make when they want to improve their well-being is that they start up here and they set themselves some really big and demanding goals. And then, of course, just like a New Year's resolution, within weeks, real life has come crashing back into their awareness, and they've been unable to keep up with that big demanding goal. The demands of life, of their routine, their carrying responsibilities, they're in the way. So what we do is we strip this right back. There might be a goal there, but we can strip it right back to a very, very small item of behavior, a habit. And habits are very powerful when we're consistent with them because over time they get us a great result. Think of the difference between someone, running a marathon once a year versus committing to go for a walk every lunchtime. The latter is much more sustainable. It's much more likely to happen, and it's much less likely that they'll injure themselves doing it, unlike the big scary goal of running a marathon. And what's great about these, we can build healthy habits into basically anyone's routine because they are tiny, tiny things. And we start with them at being so small, there's no excuse not to do them. And that can boost a sense of self belief, self efficacy, and then people can add another habit and another habit. And before they know it, they've got routines of things that in isolation don't really move the needle a huge amount, but together and over time, they're moving towards a way of being that is something they can continue. Compare that to something like a crash diet or a personal reinvention every January 1st. It's a way of life rather than something they're going to try and sprint through. And learning how to cultivate habits is really quite straightforward. So once someone has done this, they can continue it outside of the coaching relationship for as long as they want to. So just some of the different ways that when we're able to bring the science of psychology together with coaching methods, we're able to provide a real value add for the client that we're working with. We're avoiding myths and misconceptions and misunderstandings. We're avoiding fads that have no evidence to support them. We're using methods that are supported by the scientific evidence, but in a way that is flexible and adaptable to the individual in front of us. Now, obviously, it should be apparent we offer well-being coaching, but we can also train people in some of the skills that I've been talking about, design and run entire programs that boost well-being. And we have specific courses just on psychological flexibility. I would say, out of all of the things I've learned as a practitioner over all my years, the psychological flexibility gets individuals so much of a return for their initial investment of effort and time because the skills improve goal attainment, job satisfaction, well being, general life satisfaction. There are great things to be gained by practicing these skills. So, yes, I'm passionate about it, but I also see the wins that my clients get from developing it. And what I really like to do is help organizations before they deploy any of this and have those conversations with them to help them sidestep common pitfalls when it comes to employee well-being and to help them ensure that their almost certainly limited budget is invested in a way that's going to get them a good return. So I'm going to share the resources from today, some of the things I've alluded to. I'll be sending that electronically. We've got a whole bunch of well-being related content on the YouTube channel at worklifepsych.tv. You'll have my email address, so please feel free to get in touch with follow-up questions from today. And if anything that I've raised has prompted you to think of the benefit of coaching for you or a member of your team, you can have a no commitment, free coaching chemistry session with me or a member of the team by visiting the appointments link there at the bottom of the screen. Just having a look at time, we obviously have some time left. I've not seen any questions appear in the chat, so feel free at this point if you have any questions or comments from anything that I've touched on so far, drop it into the chat. Resources, while you're thinking, resources will include the recording of today's session, and I'll link to the recordings of the previous webinars in this series, and also give you the links so that if you're interested, if today's been thought-provoking, I'll give you the links to the last two webinars in this series for 2025, exploring coaching from a few different perspectives. So please feel free. Any questions, comments, thoughts, drop them into the chat. And if you'd prefer to save it for an email directly to me, that's absolutely fine. But otherwise, if nothing's appearing in the chat, our work here is done for today. Thank you. Oh, I've seen that. Thank you, Vidhi. Thank you very much for the comments. I hope it's sparked some thought. There's only so much you can do in a session of this duration, but if I have sparked an interest in finding out more about how these methods can improve well-being, or even giving you pause for thought about your own self-care or about how you cope with the challenges that come your way, well, I think that's been well worth it. So thank you for joining me. I hope to see you at a future event. Have a great rest of your day, and look in your inboxes in the coming days for the follow-up resources. And the thing I want ringing in your ears is feel free to get in touch with any follow-up questions. But for now, thanks very much.